Hello there, my name is Jay Oberg and today I am going to share some thoughts with you on ritual manuals. I am not a historian or archaeologist by profession, but I have a general interest and overview of the subjects. So for the ordinary person listening that has arrived at this video channel, I hope to open some avenues of thoughts for you regarding ritual manuals and their significance within communities. What is a ritual manual, you ask? In its simplest definition, a ritual manual is a book of spells, a book of magic. Ritual manuals are used by men training as monks and other similar religious and traditional tribal status to enhance their connection to spirit. Ritual manuals are used by women training as priestesses and other similar religious and traditional tribal status to enhance their connection to spirit. Ritual manuals are used by holy men, monks, men who were confined together in a religious commune, boys and men who were afforded the status of presiding over rituals through their family bloodline or through social orders. The areas where ritual manuals were being used and performed were wide and varied. For instance, there are boys from the lands at the equator and in the direction to the Tropic of Cancer that trained as monks and were elevated to a schooling that encompassed ritual manuals. So you're looking at lands such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Japan, Korea, China, India, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Middle East countries, the Orient, Southeast Asia. By the 9th century, I get the impression that it was common for males going into training as a monk to be taught with ritual manuals. I do not get the impression that girls were allowed to partake in a similar training within this region. As you move over towards the west from what is now Turkey, from the 3rd century, there seems to be more of an acceptance for women taking an active role with ritual manuals in major empire jurisdictions. Women coming from high status bloodlines or being of freeborn women were being accepted within a high political and public role as priestesses. As I understand it, this was prior to the 1st century. Women who were born as slaves or had been freed from slavery were not seen as priestess material, even if they had a strong spiritual gift of using rituals through spirit energies. It is my understanding that on the quiet, they performed rituals in the provinces and rural areas for commoners, for peasants, for slaves. The continent of Africa and the Americas used men and women to lead ceremonial roles for rituals, way before the Europeans advanced upon their land, way before Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam Ceremonial roles were one aspect of rituals that men and women took part in to aid their gods, in addition to spiritual and religious rituals to resolve issues and concerns within the community. I also include the traditional custodians, ancestors, spiritual and cultural practices of the Aboriginal peoples of the Pacific with this. How each chieftaincy and their empire selected the men and the women to perform rituals was guided and led by the structure of the presiding hierarchy. All ritual manuals had their start through indigenous cultures and their personal teachings. Each indigenous culture of Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific Islands, before a contact with Europeans, Arabs, and Asians, held their own distinctive systems and processes to connect with spirit energy. So each indigenous culture held religious processes that had a connection to their environment and the universe, linking the moon, stars, and sun, and any other planetary occurrence with the behaviors of Earth, encompassing and meaning sand, soil, grass, botanicals, minerals, stones, etc. Wind, meaning cloud formation, direction and temperature, i.e. the wind direction and the wind temperature. Also fire, meaning the temperature of the fire, the colour of the fire and the appearance of the fire. And water, meaning the sea, the river, the lake, the oasis, the streams, any other water forms. The indigenous cultures used combinations of body markings, such as tattoos and paintings, food, produce, mineral and gemstones, bones, feathers, insects and animals, hair, fur, saliva, blood and sweat, with elements of earth, wind, fire and water, in conjunction with the alignment of the universe, including the importance of chants, prayers, songs, and words with actions. The knowledge from spiritual teachers to spiritual fledglings was specific to each community through oral information and practices from one generation to the next. These indigenous people were deemed to have substantial spiritual powers. Not only did they have to keep the information within specific groups of chosen people, an inner circle, but the information passed forward was kept as sacred as possible and away from those outside of the group spiritual training, knowledge, and performances. Individuals outside of the spiritual group who claimed that they had special powers were put to tests to ascertain whether they would be accepted within a spiritual guild. As I understand it, the spiritual tests and tasks undertaken would be whatever the spiritual leader designated in view of spiritual peers, or on a spiritual secondment in a specified terrain. The spirits that the indigenous cultures contacted were acknowledged as being powerful and knowing elders and gods. They took the shape of many forms and communicated in specific ways to the mediumship conducting the rituals. The spiritual energy summoned by the indigenous cultures through the ritual oracles, where they would be starting as oral communications to spirit, then later scribed into manuals as we now have and understand as ritual manuals. So the spiritual energy summoned by the indigenous cultures through the ritual oracles was used to help with all matters concerning the chieftaincy first and foremost, then the local peoples. The ritual oracles and later the ritual manuals were used to control the environment and the social aspects of the community. Everyone had to observe the spiritual and religious results. Through social discord, being out of favor and other anomalies, the indigenous spiritual individuals who presided over rituals started to venture out seeking more information and growing spiritually stronger through knowledge gained by other psychics. Those that they met on their journey that could interpret greater, through their experiences, they were able to share sacred knowledge and either overcome or summon a growing outbreak of spiritual energies, bringing imbalance to the environment, communities, and specific people. This brings me to today, in the 21st century, on this planet called Earth. As a toddler, I understood very little about spiritual matters. I was experiencing out-of-body experiences and thought nothing of it. It was as a child, through watching British and American supernatural films on television and listening to conversations that adults were having about what they had watched, that I began to take a little bit of notice. I was born in an era of children being seen and not heard, so I kept quiet and listened to the adult conversations. Some things made sense, some things were boring. As a toddler, all that I wanted to do was to play and listen to music, to play and colour in books, to play and read a children's book and my father's newspaper, or an attempt to read it like a grown-up, and play and eat ice cream. Fast forward to the age of about 8, and my parents were having conversations about people who were meddling in spiritual matters, including an aunt. Fast forward again to the age of 10, and on visits to an aunt, I was told by my father not to accept anything from her. My aunt would object, and on my last visit to see her, she handed me a small gift, a portrait of Jesus in a small plastic casing, something that most Catholics would see being sold in the church souvenir shop. I remember my aunt's home always smelling of a nice, fragrant incense and candles everywhere. Her home always seemed nice to me. My aunt had given me the gift and told me not to tell my father. When we left her home, my father asked me to hand over the gift and never to receive anything from her again. I never saw her again after that. We moved home and moved far from relatives. At least it seemed far from a child's perspective. I was starting a new school, so my attention was not on family matters, but fitting in with the new environment. Fast forward to the age of 14, and one of my mother's closest friends had brought along a lady from the Caribbean who was doing some things for people before she returned to the Caribbean. She arrived at our house one evening, had a chit chat with my mother and her friend, then did her thing. Her thing was to prepare a special sacred bath for each of us to take. I asked why and was told not to ask questions. Typical adult response in my family house. Seen and not heard. Anyway, during this time, this lady was advising my mother on something else and placing something at the front door and some other added information. Eventually, this lady left and my mother just told me not to remove anything or touch anything at certain areas. Fine by me. Nothing was explained to me, so I did not ask, and to be honest, I did not care. I was attending a girls' grammar school in London and dealing with my own teenage goings on. The one thing that I do remember during school is the conversation with some girls about spiritual matters. One day in particular had a profound effect upon me. I was walking home with some girls and one of them started talking in hushed tones about a book on the subject of spirituality and magic books. She had said that her sister had bought a fact-based book on spirituality and she was halfway through reading it. The subject matter was highly enlightening, scary, and cautionary, and this girl recommended that we all read it. She then went on to describe what she had read. It was one part of this encounter that remained with me and that has remained with me even to this day. It was about what happens to you as you fall asleep and feel your body vibrating or resonating and growing with spirit. I will not tell you what she said exactly, but her words remained in my mind. That night, after she said what she had said to a group of us girls that was walking home from school, when I went through what I thought nothing about as a child became something to think about. I became fearful of it and consciously stopped my spirit energy from rising and going through an out-of-body experience. The fear kept me awake for many hours until the vibrating, the resonating stopped and I felt heavy, almost leaden with my own physical weight. I eventually fell asleep, but I was extremely exhausted in the morning for the next school day. This situation at bedtime happened nightly. Then after about 1 month, it started to gradually lessen, to dissipate. Then it stopped altogether. I reverted to what I knew, and what I knew was Catholicism. So I reverted to Catholicism more strongly and its teachings. I started reading the Jehovah's Witness booklets that dropped into our letterbox. I was praying to and using emblems of the saints to help me through this time. There was a lot going on with school and my family, and my source of strength was with the Catholic faith. I was hearing of friends and family delving into ritual things. I was reading and seeing programs about druids, witches and witchcraft in the United Kingdom. Paganism was all around, almost like a fashion. It was almost a rage, and I understood very little about it. Halloween was becoming more strongly integrated year after year into society, becoming more accepted, but on a fun pretext. People were seeking the services of mediums. There was just confusion of me as a young woman, as a young lady. I felt uncomfortable about talking on matters of spirit. The subject matter and the words seemed to have a life of their own. I preferred to listen to others, seeking the knowledge of others through whispered conversations and recommended literature. The one thing that I did know about through school was of a ritual manual that was being used by people to access wealth. This seemed to be the fashion within the Caribbean, judging by the conversations that I was overhearing from family friends and by some first generation school children. Even some children of other cultural backgrounds were saying similar things about their family and family friends. Fast forward to around 2013, and I was sitting with some members of my local, of my London Ascension group, and a gentleman there was telling us about a ritual manual. He confided in us that his now ex-wife was practicing in the book, and this ex-wife was a professional. She was a psychiatrist, a practicing, highly learned psychiatrist. This gentleman saying to us, confiding in us in this small group, that his now ex-wife was practicing in the book. He told us that the things in the book are real and have serious consequences. He said that when you open and perform things from this ritual manual, this book, you sense, that is, you see, you hear, you smell, you feel the energy in real life. It is a profoundly serious ritual manual. So much so that a friend at the Ascension group saw various ritual manuals at the Freemasons Lodge in London, in central London, the actual headquarters. These ritual manuals were of African origin, and from what she had seen, they were being used by members, members were allowed to use them. But I suspect maybe the higher levels, the higher echelons were being open to these, or allowed to use these books. There are many ritual manuals used by many people, ordinary people like you and myself. People use it for control, for greed and greater status over others. People use it to counteract those same spells. The magic is real. I have come across people who have been on the receiving end of the destruction that a ritual manual exports. I will speak about these people and their experiences with a ritual manual in a podcast or webinar through Patreon at some point. Having a ritual manual in your home and not having the mental strength to cope with it can be detrimental to you. Those that have a ritual manual have it in a special place. It is not something for the coffee table or a casual flick through. Ritual manuals have an effect upon your own energy, so handle with great care. It was in piecing all this information that I remember the lady who arrived at my family home to provide this special sacred bath for us, that she was highly knowledgeable about ritual manuals. I remember my mother and her friend talking about her after she had gone and saying that the lady had told them that Great Britain was rife with magic and spiritual matters, more so than the Caribbean. That there were many things going on in the country that everyone was oblivious to. Everyone except those who were opening up things that should have been kept closed or sacred. She said that the country was steeped in the occult and not all the good for others, and not all for the good of others. She said that we walked amongst and with things that need dealing with. People get hold of spiritual manuals and have no idea how powerful they are. So if you really felt the need to, and I'm not going to name the title of a ritual manual, if you really wanted to get hold of one, you would find a way of getting hold of one. I could get hold of one, you could get hold of one if you really wanted to. This is not an area that or book that I feel that I need to get a hold of, but I am aware of it. It would be nice to discuss this subject with you that are listening further, but I feel that you would get better discussions with your own ascension groups when you are face to face with other members. I personally know people that have been affected by ritual manuals who are from Great Britain, the Caribbean, India, Africa, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Poland, Australia, and Ireland. If you are looking to set up your own ascension group in your area, get a copy of the 2017 Ascension Group Diary, and all the information is there to get you started, step by step and easy to follow. So, I will leave you with this for the moment. Until the next video, take good care of yourself. Much gratitude, love and light. Jay.